started, is it?
Yes, it has.
Great. Well, good morning, bore da. Welcome to this Democratic Services Committee. Can I welcome all members and officers to the meeting of the Democratic Services Committee, which, due to health and safety reasons, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as practical following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that their mobile phones are either switched off or turned on to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and officers will be asked to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. And with the exception of the chair, myself, at all other times you should keep your camera and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure that the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order that the requests are received. Please lower your hand once you've finished speaking, and the chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until you've been invited by myself. And finally, officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting. And where necessary, we'll mute those who will not be used. Officers will be asked to introduce themselves as and when they're invited to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off, not in use. So brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that. Just want to say firstly how delighted I am to be chairing this meeting. I think the Democratic Services Committee, I think it's an interesting time to be on this committee. It's a new committee for me. In my previous term, I wasn't involved in this committee, but I do think it's an exciting time. We've got the obviously the local government measures, new referral system, and of course, looking at the attendees, a great number of new members as well. So I think this is a really good time to be involved. So looking at, before we go into the main agenda, I just want to point out we've got one agenda item today, and that is the All Wales Model Constitution and Constitution Guide. Now this is going to be presented by Laura on behalf of Kelly Watson, but I just wanted to point out that ordinarily the officer to go to on any matters relating to this committee will be the head of Democratic Services, Rachel Keepins, if you'd like to say hello. I understand Rachel will be devising a forward work programme for this committee. So obviously we look forward to receiving that and providing our inputs into that forward work programme. So I think without further ado, I think we'll go into the main agenda now. The first item is apologies for absence. I've received one apology from Councillor Malcolm James. Rachel, has there been any other, or is it Andrew? Has there been any other apologies?
I haven't received any, Chair. Andrew, have you, as Cabinet Committee, received any?
No, neither have I. No, it's only from Councillor James.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Anyone from the floor want to pass on any apologies? No, I'll take silence as no. We're moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members or officers? No, great, marvellous. Third item, approval of minutes. This is going to be fun. I don't know how we're going to do this because presumably many of the members, is there any members that can approve the minutes?
Chair, they don't have to be members that were actually present in the previous committee. Members are obliged to actually approve the minutes of the previous committee, whether they were there or not.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the 21st of October 2021? I've got.
Move, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Spiller. And I've got Martin Hughes, Councillor Martin Hughes. Are you happy to second that? Are you? Yes.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair. While I'm on, just to clarify, there are some real important issues contained in the minutes, and could I ask for clarification, Chair, if the members' induction training sessions it will be something that will be put onto the forward plan, because I think it's been a very interesting experience as far as I'm concerned. But certainly lessons have been learned, and it would be good to receive members' feedback and to make sure that when we're ready to review the situation 4 or 5 years' time, that we put some of the ideas that the current intake have into good effect then. So it would be good to see that on the forward plan, Chair, perhaps in a few months' time once the current process is complete.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. That's a really good idea. I think given that we got so many new members, I think that's a really valuable contribution. Rachel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just that, yes, the member development programme will be something that will crop up on your forward work programme frequently to review it, because it's not just the induction now that you're all done and dusted. The member development programme continues throughout your term of office, to be fair. So there'll be continued training now that we're developing going forward. And be putting in your diaries. But yes, certainly look back at the actual induction period would be really, really useful, actually. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. The forward work plan is being influenced already, so good to hear. We'll move on now to item 4, and that is going to be presented by Laura Griffiths, the All Wales Model Constitution and Constitution Guide. I'll now ask the Group Manager, Legal and Democratic Services, to present the report. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Chair, and morning, members. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Laura Griffiths, Group Manager of Legal and Democratic Services, and as the Chair said, I'm here on behalf of the Monitoring Officer to present this report today. Just one item on your agenda today, because obviously we're conscious that this is quite a large agenda item. The appendices are quite large, so apologise for that in advance. I'll take you briefly through the report, and then if members have got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. So members will be aware that legislative requirements, we've got to have a constitution. And we currently have a constitution in place, and that will vary depending on different local authorities. They will all have their own constitution depending on their particular needs within that council. But members will be aware that we had a piece of legislation that came into force this year, and that was the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, and it has brought in a number of changes that require us to update our current constitution. Now, in light of those changes, the All Wales Monitoring Officer Group, so that's a group of all of the monitoring officers across Wales, they decided to commission a firm, Brown Jacobson, a legal firm, to actually review the All Wales Model Constitution and to update it accordingly. And they have done that. And they shared a copy of that with all monitoring officers, and then monitoring officers went away and they have considered it, updated, see whether it's fit for purpose, see whether it suits them. And we've done the same here in Bridgend, and that is currently attached to Appendix 1. Now, what I would say to members is that whilst the revised draft looks quite different from our current constitution, it is by its very nature comprising the same elements. So in reality, the extent of actual changes in terms of how the council work are quite small, as the general view is that significant elements of the current version are fit for purpose for us. So just to flag up for members, for example, we've decided to retain our financial procedure rules because finance officers recently reviewed those and brought them up to date. So we've kept our own financial procedure rules. We've also decided to keep our own contract procedure rules because, again, those have been thoroughly reviewed recently by legal officers. So those are generally the provisions that we've retained. We've also retained the current rules in relation to the officer member protocol in relation to conduct, and we've also retained our own we decided not to adopt any of the requirements in relation to planning matters that go before that committee, because again, planning officers determined that we have our own processes in place that are very fit for purpose, so we didn't want to adopt those. So otherwise, Chair, the majority of the Constitution, like I said, remains as it is under the current Constitution. So, for example, the procedures at full council, the overview and scrutiny procedure rules, those are the same. The Cabinet procedure rules, those are also the same. And in terms of the recommendation, you will see that we're asking the committee today to consider that model constitution and also accompanying guides. So if I just give an explanation in relation to the constitution guides, which you will see is attached at Appendix 2, there's now a requirement under the Local Government and Election Wales Act to have a constitution guide available to members of the public so that they're able to have more engagement in the local government process, but to be able to understand how our constitution works. Now, you will appreciate that it was very hard to condense a constitution guide, so that guide is still quite lengthy. And for that reason, you'll see that Appendix 3, I've drafted just a beginner's guide that I propose that we also put on the website because it just gives a snapshot, overarching view of how the Constitution looks. So, like I said, there's 3 documents there for the committee to consider, and the recommendation is asking for the committee to consider all of those documents and then agree in principle to them being submitted to Cabinet and Council for approval. They have to go to both Cabinet and Council. Cabinet will need to approve the executive functions, and then Council will fully adopt the Constitution. But we do have some time in relation to this, Chair, because we're aiming to take the final versions to Cabinet and Council in the autumn. So I'm in your hands as committee members as to whether you want to consider those documents today and agree to them being presented to full Cabinet and Council, or whether instead, as we have the time, whether you would instead prefer to establish a small working group of members to look at the Constitution in more detail, and we can certainly support those working group meetings. Rachel and myself are more than happy to support those. So that's where we are in terms of the report, Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. Must admit, I had a look at the Constitution and all the supplementary guides that went with it last night. It's quite a lot to get through. I don't want to influence things too much, but I like the idea of a working group. I think there's quite a lot to consider here, and I don't think we could really do it justice over a couple of hours. But I'm willing to be, obviously, goes up saying, guided by other members' views on this. Just one thing I'm thinking, really, in terms of the Constitution. We're in a new a way of working now with hybrid working. I must admit, I looked at it so quickly. Does it reflect that new way of working, the hybrid way of working now? Because
yes, it does, Chair, because obviously that was a requirement that's brought in under the Local Government and Election Wales Act as well. So there are provisions in there in relation to hybrid meetings. Mm-hmm. And members will remember that we also had the multi-location meetings policy that was recently approved by Council. So it does factor in the new arrangements, in addition to all of the other arrangements that we've had to bring in as a result of the Local Government and Election Wales Act. For example, there's more functions now in relation to the Standards Committee, they have more responsibility in relation to ensuring that group leaders ensure code of conduct issues addressed across their group. Also, members will be aware that there were recently changes to the Governance and Audit Committee membership as a result of the Local Government and Election Wales Act. So the Constitution brings all that into play. And then it does then, you'll see, and I appreciate it's a considerably lengthy document, Chair, it references all of our current committees, so there's been no changes in relation to that.
Interesting. Before I bring Councillor Spiller in, just another point I had really, and I am quite passionate about ensuring that our citizens know how they can participate in our democracy. And given that it is still quite a lengthy document, perhaps there could be consideration of other ways that we disseminate this information. Not sure how that would look like, videos and that sort of thing. I don't know, but I think it's really important that the public know about our things like our petitions committee and that they have the right to ask questions at council, because my gut feeling is that very, very few know about this, and I think it could be, it's really important that we're transparent. But anyway, that's my point on that. And that if we do go for the working group, perhaps that's something we could explore. We've got a question from Councillor Ian Spiller. Would you like to say your question or your comments?
My comments rather than a question. Thank you, Chair. Really and truly, I just want to echo what you said yourself, that this is a very, very lengthy document that needs proper consideration. Engaging with the public is something that I'm very keen to see the council do more of, and to make sure that the public is aware of its own recourse if they want to petition the council, but also with regards to the Constitution, any amendments really need to be clear and understood. I, for one, don't think I could consider that properly in a 2-hour meeting, because it takes a lot more than reading something of this length once, really to do it justice. So I would be quite happy, Chair, if you would consider a working group to discuss this properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. So, Laura, what do you think a working group would look like then?
Well, Chair, just to come back in relation to the public and getting them involved, there is a requirement under the new Act that we have a public participation strategy. So the authority will be looking to put one of those in place. So that will very much be putting the emphasis on involving the public as far as we can. In relation to the working group, I'm in the hands of the committee. I would suggest that I think perhaps all of the committee is probably too much in relation to too many members for the working group. So perhaps we could agree a small selection of 5 or 6 members, Chair, if the committee was in agreement to that, and we could look at setting up those meetings over the summer recess if that was convenient for members, again with support from Rachel and myself, and like you and Councillor Spiller said, we can then go through every section of the Constitution, should that working group so wish, and then we can look at feeding that back to the next Democratic Services Committee if we have time, or if we don't, this committee agreeing that the feedback of the working group is fed directly back to Cabinet and Council when they consider the final version for adoption.
Excellent, thank you, Laura. So in order to proceed or not with that, would we need a proposer for a working group? And then
yes, if we could just for clarity, Chair, if we could have a mover and a second for the recommendation that we establish a working group to look at this in more detail, and then a decision on the number of members to sit on that working group, and then the members.
Excellent. Councillor Spiller, are you proposing that?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to propose.
Thank you. And Councillor Martin Hughes, are you seconding it as well?
Sorry, Chair, there. Yes, I'm happy to second, Chair, and I'd very much like to be involved in the working group as well, if I could.
There we are. Okay, so do we have any comments on well, do we have any volunteers? We've had one already. How many would be? Do we have any comments on how many people should be included? 4 or 5, perhaps, or as many volunteers as we have. I will volunteer as well. Councillor Spiller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to volunteer as well.
Oh, there's 3. Do we have anyone else who wants to? Oh, Councillor Robert Smith, do you want to come in? Is that you volunteering?
Yeah, I'd be happy to volunteer as well.
Oh, marvellous. So we got 4 there. I think that's the start of a good committee. Anyone else? Forever. Hold your peace. Excellent. So, is there any other comments on that report then, or are we just going to proceed with the working group now? Is that a new hand, Councillor Smith?
That's not,
no. No? Excellent. So, Laura, if you could do the logistics for that said work. Oh, hang on. We've got Rachel coming in now. Would you like to say your comments, Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. All it was I was just going to say, if there's anything where members maybe who aren't on the working group, if they have seen any areas that they think need to be discussed or need to be focused on, if they want us to maybe bring them up now so that the working group can pick up on them, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Excellent. So Laura, we'll just look forward to you putting in place the logistics for that said working group, and yeah, look forward to working with members who've volunteered for that working group. The next item, urgent items. I haven't received any urgent items for today's agenda. So all it leaves me to do really now is to thank all members for their attendance, and wish you a very good day for the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone. Thank you ever so much, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair.